Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
Can you just have more confidence in me?
You can look at the...
Jeez Louise.
You can look at... You're not even watching. You almost hit this car right here.
There is no car.
There is a car directly behind you.
Obviously on the right. So I'm going to cross like this. I'm seeing the arrow pointing this way, so I'm supposed to go this way.
People tend to slow down when you're going around the curve.
All right, so another opportunity for him to talk down to her in a way that makes her feel little and like a child, and they're doing that now. She was backing up, and he was wanting her to look in the rear view camera, I think, on the dash, and she was looking in her mirrors. It looked fine. She didn't look anywhere near the cars. She obviously didn't hit any car, and he's saying, look, micromanaging her, I think because of his anxiety and his attitude of paternalism that he frequently resorts to, which is aggravating, I'm sure, to her. It's aggravating. If it's aggravating for me, and I know for many of you, imagine what it's like for her.
Babe, you are...
I was not going to hit that rock.
You are literally about to hit
you
this...
are exaggerating.
No, I'm not exaggerating.
Now, maybe that we didn't get to see how close that she was. Now, to be clear, she knows how to drive. She just hasn't driven on the right side of the road in the States. She was saying in her country they drive on the other side. So it's not like she doesn't know how to drive. She's not a child. She's not a 15-year-old learning how to drive.
Do you see how close you are to
Babe,
this?
I was not... Listen. No, I know how to drive. I'm not learning how to drive. I know how to drive.
Now, according to that angle, she did look very close, and it would make sense that if there was a deficit in your driving, it would have to do with the awareness of the space of your car, right? It's actually kind of interesting to think about that when we're driving a car, particularly cars today, because cars I grew up with in the 80s, there weren't all the airbags. I mean, I'm glad the airbags exist and everything, but the cars were very flimsy back then, particularly like Honda Civics and the kind of thing I was driving. And so the windows were very big. You could see out every window. It was unobscured. There are times when I'm in my car now, my Honda right now, when I'm taking a left onto, with a crosswalk going, I actually have to look around, because there's an airbag in the, I don't know what you call it, but next to the windshield, right? And so there's a huge blind spot in the middle of the front of my vision. You could actually hit someone if you don't look around the airbag sometimes. And so for her, she's used to driving on the right side of the car, on the left side of the road. And so for her, she might not have a sense of where the car is in space and time. And it is kind of interesting the way that we learn how to do that, the way that we can't see, we see like an obstruction, a pole or a pothole or something. And we just get a sense for where our wheels are and where the corners of our car is. And if you've ever adjusted to a new car, a smaller car or a bigger car, you'll have that feeling. It just feels different. We extend ourselves into the entire car so that we can make sure we don't hit things. And so if you're used to thinking of your car as being more to the left of you, then you could see how she would be a little bit too far to the right. But there's other ways to talk to her. She's not a child. You don't have to be mean.
It's all good. Hey, calm down for a second. Seriously.
Yeah.
Don't mess my car up.
So, there's another way to communicate this. He could say something like, so, not your fault, but I'm having a lot of anxiety about my car. I don't want you to, I know you're a good driver and I don't want to talk down to you, but can you please just drive a little? This is actually probably pertinent to a lot of us, that when you have a partner, perhaps your spouse, who doesn't drive slower, you want them to drive slower, there's a way to talk to them that will actually help them to drive slower than a way that people typically talk to people, just like, hey, slow down, or hey, you're driving too fast. Instead of, hey, I'm having anxiety right now, not your fault. If you slowed down, I would feel less anxiety. It's a much more inviting request.
Listen, can I just drive?
You're starting to irritate me.
I'm driving. Oh, God. This is so frustrating. Don't give me a next mansplaining. I don't.
So, yeah. And she usually can. She can usually identify this, which gives me hope, but then she puts up with it and she doesn't actually push back. And then a lot of people around her will tell her that she's just supposed to put up with it.
We have been trying,
Trying what? We have not been trying.
When we are intimate, we are using a condom. But there has been a little oopsie here and there, so the possibility of a bun being in the oven could be real. I'm not trying to give it too much energy so that Bilal doesn't pay attention to it. I'm just keeping it low.
We are not trying to have any children right now at all.
Yikes. So, according to her, she is saying, look, we're having some accidents while using condoms, and so I'm trying to keep it on the down low. And I'm trying. I'm actually trying to get pregnant. And he's like, we are not trying. So that tells me that they're not on the same page. They should be on the same page.
I mean, our life could change a year from now. You know, things could be different.
How things can change overnight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a child, always should bring happiness. I also know that how she is at times. She sometimes get emotional. You get emotional at times. It gives me a little feeling of like, will you abandon me,
Okay, well, it started out as paternalistic. You get emotional sometimes, like, you both get emotional. He just expresses emotions in a very different way, in a very subdued way, right? But anyway, so he is saying that he gets terrified that she's going to abandon. He even uses that word, abandon me. I'm worried you're going to abandon me. Okay, that's good that he can go to that place. That shows that he can be vulnerable. That's probably much more core to the issue and gives her a chance to actually go, oh, I see. That's why you're this way or that way, because you're worried. That gives her a chance to actually express empathy and care so that he could feel less worry about that and less likely to resort to the kinds of defenses that he engages in.
There's been times where, you'll, no longer say I want to be with you and stuff like that. So all that, to be real, that stuff scares me as well too, because I've been divorced before, so never want to have to go through that again, let alone.
Now, there's a possibility that he's only bringing that up right now because he's trying to avoid the reality of getting pregnant. So there's that possibility.
Having a child,
Sure.
Anytime you've been into a relationship before and things don't work out, like you get a divorce and you have children, that makes it way worse. When you start something new in a relationship and, you're hoping things work out and you're thinking about having children, but then the other person talks about leaving every now and then when you get into an argument or, any issues, that kind of makes me back up.
Yeah, that's smart, actually, right? That if they did have children and they were to move ahead with getting pregnant, what if she does leave him or vice versa? That would be potentially hard for a lot of people. So, yeah, makes total sense. Go to couple therapy, work on the relationship, and maybe that would help, because without that, I don't know if they're going to be, well, I don't know. The fact that they're still together means that they probably have a lot of strengths and functionality behind the scenes that we're not seeing. I'm going to hope for that.
In your American culture,
you
you guys kick your kids out by 18.
College is not free, baby.
Well, then back in my country, tertiary education is
baby.
free.
Exactly. Everything. This is America, baby. Nothing is free.
Why are you getting so irate with this conversation?
I'm not getting irate. Just do
you
me
don't
one
even
favor.
want to finish your pros and cons.
I'm about to finish it.
All your cons and temper. My pros is forever. Legacy. Change your life. Love. All these things last for the rest of your life.
Baby,
your cons is limited finances.
Listen for a second.
Okay, so at the first, I didn't show the whole thing because it was kind of long, is they decided to go over pros and cons. They were talking with the fertility doctor, and the doctor recommended that they do this. I think it's a good idea. I would hope that the fertility doctor would also recommend couple therapy because it's probably more important for the two of them. But anyway, so they're doing the pros and cons. It started out okay, but pretty quickly, both of them were not doing the exercise in the best way. I think particularly her. When he would bring up a con, he said, well, okay, pros, there's pros and there's cons. he brought up, well, the financial issues with children, you have to pay for them, there's a lot of expense. And she immediately started arguing with that. And, the pro and the con list, it's a brainstorm, you're listing it out. It's a starting point, right? You can get them all on paper, and then you can talk about how important they are for you, not how it's supposed to be important for someone else. You can't tell someone, look, you shouldn't care about the finances with a baby. You should just want a baby, right? Now, she could say, I don't care about the finances and I want a baby, but you can't tell someone else how they're supposed to feel or what they're supposed to do. You could try to be persuasive and that sort of thing. But anyway, she's nitpicking every single point that he brings up. Now, again, on the scale of things, he, at least on the show, in terms of what they show us, is much more, problematic in conversation. And he's kind of being that way in this conversation as well. He's speaking in that very authoritarian way of just like, this is the way that it is, instead of like, well, I feel, or these are my preferences, or this is how things are going with me. So when the fertility doctor asks them to do a pro and a con list, that's great if they have the foundational communication pattern to withstand such an intervention, which I don't think that they have, or at least they're not exhibiting right now.
Now, I'm fearful in the fact that sometimes when there's problems that arise, you're quick to want to run for the hills. Why am I saying it, though? Am I saying it out of the blue, or am I saying because based off of some experience of what you have said?
Have I done it? I mean, people say things when they're angry.
All right, so it sounds like she has threatened to leave him, and that scares him. Now, it's interesting how this is a self-perpetuating cycle where I think all of his, or a lot of his behavior toward her that is bothering her and hurting her and causing her to want to occasionally think about leaving him and divorce him is because he's terrified of abandonment. He has these defenses that come up. And then she's so aggravated by that, and we've seen all that footage, right? And then she'll say, I just don't know if I can deal with you. And then she says, maybe I should leave. Maybe we should get a divorce. Well, that, of course, re-triggers him and gives him even more reason to think that she's going to leave him. But he's the one that's causing it in the first place, right? So I hope that they can see that.
There's limits to things, though. Like saying the D word, done, or divorce. Like, those are hot words you should never say.
Yeah, I've actually said this to couples. It's debatable. Unless someone's really going down that path, then you should bring it up. You should say, hey, I'm thinking about divorce, that kind of thing. But I've worked with couples, and I think she's in that camp because I don't think, even when she has brought that up, I wasn't there, of course, but she's still with him, and she still wants to have kids with him. She still wants to live the rest of her life with. I'm sure she has questions at this point, but for the most part, it seems like she's in it to win it. And yeah, I've worked with couples like this before where they'll bring up divorce very quickly. And for some people, for most people, when you do that, it's such an atomic bomb for the other person. For you, all of us go through that, right? We go through a conflict, a tense moment in our relationship. And even in the strongest relationships, during that conflict, it's natural to think like, did I marry the right person, or are we headed toward divorce? So it's natural for that notion to emerge in you, but to voice it to the other person is very hurtful. The other person could be, oh my God, because the thought is, if you're the Bilals of the world, it's like, well, she tells me when she's really angry at me that she wants to leave me. And then when things go back to normal, I don't hear that anymore. But does that mean it's still lingering in the background? I mean, she would have reasons not to bring that up, particularly if you're from his point of view and you think you're being scammed partially, which I don't think is happening. But yeah, I recommend that people word it in a different way. You can say things that will express how you feel. You could just be like, oh my God, I'm so upset at you right now. I just don't even know what to do. And I have some thoughts that I don't want to even entertain right now. But and maybe even that could be triggering to other people. But, you can express yourself. But a lot of times, so let me give you two different couples with the same level of conflict. And let's say it's minor to moderate. It's doable. The conflict isn't that bad. One couple, they although have that emerging feeling of wanting a divorce when they maybe, say once every 4 months, they have a big blow up that lasts for a couple days, and the thought of divorce enters their mind, but only during that time. And for both couples, it's the same. But for one couple, they don't say it. And for another couple, they do say it, or one of the individuals says it. It's just during that time, just be like, I don't know, sometimes I think about divorcing you. Should we get divorced? Maybe we're not good for each other. It's a very common thing to say in a conflict, right? Well, the second couple, the couple that will say the D word, in my experience, it's just anecdotal. It'd be hard to study this sort of thing because it'd be hard to control for all the different factors. But in my experience, that couple that says it will be much more likely to get a divorce and much more likely to not be able to reconcile or make up because that word has been brought up, or the notion of breaking up permanently, whatever word that is. Some people, they're not married, they're pre-marriage or deciding not to get married, and they'll talk about leaving each other or breaking up with each other. And when you say that, even if the other person is just like, well, maybe it's just when they're in conflict, but it can be really damaging to someone's trust. And I don't recommend people do that. There's a lot of ways to express yourself. There's a lot of ways to talk about your hurt and your pain and your suffering. There's a lot of ways to express that without using that word, unless you're really wanting to go down that road. And what I recommend to people is that you wait until the motivation for divorce is consistent over many different domains and moods. So if during a conflict you want to get a divorce, but it goes away when you're not in conflict, then that's one thing. But if you're wanting to leave the person when you're in conflict and when you're not in conflict, then that's something different.
I am very fearful and scared of having children with the thought that you may want to up and leave one day.
Yeah. So at first I'm like, oh, he's talking about his vulnerable feelings. That's great. But then he keeps using it. I think it's so, and she might even detect that. Or just like, so are you just saying this as a way of trying to avoid having kids with me? Because, it certainly could come across that way, right? But I don't know. This could be his way of saying, well, at least I can, in this moment, express my deepest, darkest fears because I'm pushed up against the wall. So maybe I'll reveal that now. I don't know.
One of my biggest fears is that she will leave because she threatened to do it before.
I understand your point, but I don't have intentions of leaving or have intentions of just not allowing my marriage to work. So I'm letting him know that I'm here. You know what is my fear? My fear is that every year would be the same conversation. Time will be passing.
Yeah, this is good. So now she's talking about her fear instead of attacking and yelling at each other about the pros and the cons. She's like, well, I'm afraid that we're never going to have a kid. And this will be a conversation that you'll always see it from a negative way. And it's interesting because let's say that he is open to having kids, but he just wants to wait. That's what he has said before. I think there's a good possibility that's true. There's also a good possibility that he's just avoiding it and doesn't actually ever want to have more kids. I don't know. But let's say it's the first one that he actually does want to have kids with her, but he just wants to take some time to get to know her. They haven't spent time together as a couple, and he wants that time to themselves because it is rational to say, well, once we have kids, we're not going to have a lot of together time. We'll have some, but we're not going to have as much as we can actually get when we don't have kids. So let's wait on that a little bit. That's fine. That's what he said. And so let's say that he is legit and wants to have kids. It's interesting how both of their fears, without addressing it to each other and reassuring each other, could actually cause it, right? He could, due to his worries about her leaving him, put up all these walls and refrain from having kids legitimately, but that could push her away such that she does leave him, and he's like, see, there you go. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. Or because she's afraid that he won't want to have kids, that she's overpowering and pressuring him and getting in conflicts with him and not trusting him. And that actually makes him, and then she's threatening to leave him because she's like, look, if you don't have kids, I'm going to leave. And then that causes him to be like, well, I don't want to have kids with you now. It's interesting how these things can cause each other. That's systems theory. That's system theory in action, is when people are actually operating from their own self-interest and, the interest of the family and other people, and causing the problem that they're trying to avoid through a recursive mutual causal loop that's causing each other to do the thing that is causing the problem to be perpetuated.
And there will be no baby. He has been hurt before, and women have walked out on him, but I'm not his past. At the same time, and I'm not going to live my life without a baby. So whether Bilal and I are staying together or not, I'm not going to allow anyone to waste my time.
Yeah, so you hear that. She's just like, look, either let's have a kid or I time's a ticking, so maybe I will have to leave you. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.